Hey everybody, it's Emily, the Crazy Worm Lady. I'm here today with an update on our Worm Factory 360. And I have not opened this since the last time I looked in here. So I thought I would bring you along. This paper on the top here is pretty dry. And it looks like we've got a ton of sprouts in here. So this is where we put the what do you call it? The coleslaw mix. And I think probably from the moisture, we've got quite the collection of red mites and springtails there. But I'm not overly concerned about that. But check out all these sprouts. I talk about this all the time. You know that this is good fertilizer when every last seed you put in here sprouts. So let's see what our worms are doing. There's a piece of the cabbage that is still not breaking down. It will with time. That's why I've been so stubborn about it. I just want to see how much time exactly it'll take. But these worms seem a little sluggish, which is strange. It's nice and warm in the house here. Just going to turn over some of these sprouts in here because they'll break down again and the worms will eat them. And it's looking like they're definitely going to need some more food. Here's one of the avocado shells. People always ask me if they will break down, and in time they really do. I mean, it's nice and kind of crisped up now, so it will finish breaking down. It just takes time. I think some people pull out the shells once they kind of pick them clean, but usually if you wait, it'll finish up breaking down. But the castings still look really nice in here. Here's that kind of big piece of cabbage that was not breaking down, but it looks like it's starting to shrink, so they're making progress on it. And here's a handful of carrots I threw in here the other day. They were not cooked. It was just some end pieces. So that will also break down with some time. But overall, I am pleased. It's not wet in here, but it's also not really dry. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna add any moisture because the food I put in here should probably add adequate moisture. So let me grab a little something and we will feed these guys up. So before I feed, I thought I would look at this, these trays below to show you what some of this more finished compost looks like in this worm factory. And it feels really nice. I see very few residual scraps, mainly just some of these avocado shells, like I said, that take a little bit longer. Sorry, I almost fell there. One thing I'm not a huge fan about with this is that because it is kind of low to the ground, you have to kind of stoop to work in it. But I do like to look in these lower levels every once in a while and turn them up because the system, you know, it breathes, but not as well as some of the other ones. So when you turn it up, it allows a little bit of aeration so that the castings are easier to harvest when it's time. But you will see, you know, there's a lot of worms still in this second tray down. So let me go even further down and I'll show you how it kind of progresses as you go down the layers. Alright, so this is the next tray down. I feel like this tray actually has a little bit more unprocessed bedding. Then the other one, I see a few pieces of cardboard here and there. I'll have to pick out a few of these windows from junk mail. I'm not always super diligent about cutting all of them out before I shred them. I just pick it out of the castings when it's done. It's not going to harm anything, but it's definitely not going to break down either. So again, still a lot of worms. That's part of the disappointment for me with this worm factory, is that it's marketed in such a way to make you believe that all of the worms are going to move up to the top. And I mean, there's certainly not as many worms down here, but there's still a good number. I'm actually impressed that it's not as wet down here as I would have expected. I mean, it's super flaky. This would be really easy to screen. So I have 2 more layers. We'll peek real quick. Alright, so this is the problem when you get further down here. It is really compacted. I mean, it does break up pretty easily, but because of the weight, it's much more compact down here. And you can see, I mean, these trays, I fill them to the brim. And look at how far it is compacted down. And again, still a good number of worms in here. So it's not as many, so it's not terrible to harvest, but it's certainly not as easy as it is marketed to be. So 1 more layer down, and then I'll add the food to our new tray. Okay, so this is the layer right above our sump. And again, you can see the ridges from the layers above. And still, I would estimate there's a couple hundred worms in this layer as well. And this one is not as flaky. I mean, it would still be screenable, but it's not perfect. So, you know, it's just one of those things that, I mean, the system does work, but for me it just tends to have a little bit more issues than some of my other systems, because if it doesn't get adequate aeration and all, it can get a little gross down here. Random pebble, I think this was from my sump area, which I've shown before, because they're not technically supposed to go down into the sump, but they tend to love it down there. But the castings are nice and dark, almost black, so that's definitely a nice thing. And a quick peek in the sump. So this is not supposed to have worms in it, but it has worms, it has castings, has a little bit of everything down here. So I'm actually going to pull some of this out, because if there's not enough room for the system to breathe, it'll just get more compacted. So I'm just going to toss this in the layer above. At least some of it. But you can hear and see it's a lot more clayish down here. Every time I look down here, it just shocks me how many castings fall through and how many worms end up hanging out down here. And I do keep a little bit of newspaper down here for them to eat on if they need it. But they're perfectly capable of going up to the upper layers. It's just something I've always done. It also absorbs some of the moisture if it drips down here. And under this little ladder that helps them move up, that's where the drainage sump is. And I don't have any drainage at all. But that little hole right down there drains down through the spigot if you would have too much moisture and it would kind of flood down here. So that's what I do. and this update is getting way too long, so let me go grab the food and we'll feed and then I'll call it a day. Okay, so I have a bag of scraps my friend gave me at work. I'm just going to put this in here, and yes, there's some citrus, which can in general be a no-no, but it's not a lot of it. Just looks like the ends of some oranges. There's a banana peels, some celery and cucumber, it looks like. So these bananas, oh, it looks like it's a grapevine as well. I think that's going to be a nice little feast for them. So I'm going to add a little bit of bedding and cover it up, and we will check in next week. Okay, I just decided to throw this back on top. This should absorb the moisture. Probably going to be a glutton for punishment. I'm sure I will get some fruit flies with those bananas and oranges, but we will play it by ear and see what happens. As I've said before, I'm all about constantly experimenting with this, so I'm going to see what happens. So we're going to call it a day. Please like this video, subscribe if you want some more content. Sorry this update ran a little bit longer than usual. I just kind of wanted to show everybody how the whole system worked, you know, going down the layers. So drop your comments below and I'll bring you guys an update next week.